She stood on the wooden platform with her chin raised, auburn hair catching the harsh afternoon light, green eyes defiant as men bid on her like livestock. But something was wrong with this scene. The woman being sold wore a clean dress, while every other person in the crowd looked like they hadn't washed in weeks. Her posture was too straight, too proud for someone who had supposedly been broken by servitude. The auctioneer kept wiping sweat from his brow, stammering through descriptions of her skills while carefully avoiding her gaze. Even the men shouting prices seemed unsettled, glancing at each other with confusion rather than the usual crude enthusiasm of a human auction. "She refuses to cook," Marcus Harrison announced to the crowd, but his voice cracked on the word refused, as if he was hiding something much worse than simple disobedience. The strangest detail was her hands. For someone who had supposedly been forced into kitchen labor, her fingers were too smooth, too graceful, and when she finally spoke, her voice carried an accent that didn't belong to any servant. "You can bid all you want," she said, scanning the crowd with those piercing green eyes, "but you'll never own what matters." That's when Jackson Cole felt something twist in his chest because he recognized something in her eyes that the other men missed entirely. Something that made him realize this wasn't just about refusing to cook. This was about a secret worth dying for. If you're enjoying this incredible story of courage and defiance, make sure to like and share this video. Jackson Cole pushed through the crowd, his boots heavy against the dusty ground of the town square. The woman on the platform was stunning in a way that made grown men forget their words. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, framing a face with high cheekbones and full lips that remained pressed in defiant silence. Even from 30 feet away, those emerald eyes seemed to cut through every person in the crowd, like she was evaluating their souls. $50, shouted a man near the front, his voice shaking with nervous excitement. Marcus Harrison nodded toward the bidder, but Jackson noticed how the older man's hands trembled as he gripped the platform's edge. Sweat stained his shirt despite the cool afternoon air. Whatever had happened between him and this woman, it had rattled him badly. $60, called another voice. Elena's gaze swept across the assembled men with ice-cold calculation. When her eyes met Jackson's, he felt something electric shoot through his chest. She didn't look away or lower her gaze like a broken woman would. Instead, she studied him with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. Her head tilted slightly as if she recognized something familiar. Jackson found himself stepping closer to the platform. The woman's beauty was undeniable, but it was the intelligence behind those green eyes that stopped his breath. This wasn't just some servant girl who had refused kitchen duties. The way she held herself, the subtle refinement in her posture suggested someone who had been raised with education and privilege. "She's got fire in her," muttered an old-timer beside him. "But Harrison says she's dangerous. Won't cook, won't clean, won't do nothing she's told." $75. The bidding continued, voices growing more desperate. Jackson watched Elena's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Her fingers, which he now noticed were indeed too soft for hard labor, clenched briefly at her sides before she forced them to relax. She was fighting to maintain control, but something about the increasing bids was affecting her more than she wanted to show. "Why won't she cook?" Jackson asked the old man quietly. "Harrison won't say exactly. Just that she near killed a man over it." The old-timer leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Word is, she's got some kind of dark past, maybe killed before." That's when Jackson noticed something that made his blood run cold. Along Elena's left wrist, barely visible beneath the sleeve of her dress, was a thin, white scar. Not the kind from kitchen accidents or farm work, but precise and deliberate. Someone had tried to tie her down before. As the bidding hit $90, Elena's eyes found Jackson's again, and this time he saw something that made him understand why Harrison looked so afraid. She wasn't just defiant, she was planning something. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more amazing frontier stories. Jackson's mind raced as he studied the scar on Elena's wrist. Someone had bound her before, and from the look of calculated rage flickering behind her beautiful features, they had paid dearly for it. The crowd around him grew more agitated as the bidding climbed, but he couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was missing the real danger here. $100, bellowed a thick-set man with gold teeth, stepping forward aggressively. Elena's green eyes snapped to the new bidder, and Jackson saw her nostrils flare almost imperceptibly. Her full lips curved into what might have looked like a smile to others, but Jackson recognized it as something far more menacing. She was memorizing faces, cataloging threats. Harrison banged his makeshift gavel on a wooden crate. "We have 100. Do I hear 110? What exactly did she do when she refused to cook?" Jackson pressed the old-timer beside him. The man's weathered face went pale. Harrison had some business partners over, important men from back east. She was supposed to prepare their supper. He paused, glancing nervously at Elena. Story goes, one of them got handsy with her while she was working. Next thing anyone knew, the man was on the floor bleeding from his head, and she was standing over him with a cast-iron skillet. Jackson felt something twist in his stomach, and what disgust at her violence, but a fierce surge of approval. The bastard had gotten what he deserved. $120, shouted another voice. Elena's breathing had become slightly more rapid, though she fought to hide it. Her chest rose and fell beneath the simple blue dress that somehow made her auburn hair appear even more lustrous in the afternoon light. Jackson found himself wondering what kind of life had taught such a beautiful woman to fight like a cornered wildcat. "The problem," continued the old man, "is what happened after. She looked Harrison straight in the eye and told him she'd kill any man who tried to force her to do anything against her will. Said it calm as you please, like she was discussing the weather." A chill ran down Jackson's spine. He believed her completely. $130. The bidding was getting frantic now. That's when Elena did something unexpected. She stepped forward to the edge of the platform, her movement fluid and graceful despite the circumstances. The crowd fell silent, mesmerized by her stunning presence. "Before any of you spend your money," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the square, "you should know something important about what you're buying." Harrison's face went white as bleached bone. "Elena, don't you dare." But she was already speaking, and her next words sent a shock through Jackson that made him understand why this woman had never been broken. "I'm not what you think I am." The entire crowd held its breath as Elena's words hung in the air. Her emerald eyes swept across the assembled men with the confidence of someone who had never truly been anyone's property. The afternoon sun caught the copper highlights in her auburn hair, making her appear almost ethereal despite the harsh reality of her situation. "I can read and write better than most of you," she continued, her refined accent becoming more pronounced with each word. "I speak 3 languages fluently, and I've managed household accounts for properties worth more than this entire town." Jackson felt his chest tighten. This wasn't just an educated woman. This was someone from the upper class who had fallen from grace. The mystery of how such a refined beauty had ended up on Harrison's auction block deepened with every revelation. "Shut your mouth," Harrison hissed, but his voice cracked with desperation rather than authority. "I refuse to cook," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly across the square. "Because the man who grabbed me wasn't just being crude. He recognized who I really am." Her green eyes found Jackson's again, and he saw something vulnerable flicker beneath the defiance. "And when he tried to use that knowledge against me, I made sure he couldn't." The bidders began murmuring among themselves, suddenly uncertain. A woman with that kind of education and social connections wasn't just dangerous because she could fight. She was dangerous because she had information, knowledge, possibly even powerful enemies looking for her. Jackson stepped closer to the platform. Every instinct told him this woman was in more trouble than simple servitude. Someone of her obvious refinement didn't end up being sold by a man like Harrison without a dark story behind it. "What did you do before?" called out the gold-toothed bidder, but his earlier enthusiasm had cooled considerably. Elena's smile became genuinely predatory. "I was married to a very wealthy man, a man who discovered that his beautiful young wife wasn't as innocent as he thought." Her voice dropped to a tone that made Jackson's pulse quicken. "When he tried to punish me for my independence, I showed him exactly how resourceful an educated woman can be." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Jackson realized that half the men were now looking at Elena not with lust, but with genuine fear. "Is your husband looking for you?" someone called out. "My husband," Elena said, her green eyes glit, tearing with something that might have been satisfaction, "will never look for anyone again." This story is getting intense. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. The implications hit Jackson like a physical blow. This stunning, refined woman wasn't just running from servitude or an abusive situation. She was running from something far more serious. And every man in this crowd was now calculating whether possessing her was worth the risk of whatever consequences might follow. But as Jackson watched her beautiful face transform with quiet triumph at their growing fear, he realized something that changed everything. He didn't care what she had done. The crowd began to fracture as Elena's implications sank in. Several men backed away from the platform, their faces pale as they reconsidered the wisdom of purchasing a woman who might have killed her husband. But others pressed forward, their eyes bright with a different kind of hunger, the thrill of owning something truly dangerous. Jackson watched Elena's face as she observed the crowd's reaction. Her beauty remained stunning, but now it carried an edge of lethal grace that made his pulse race in ways he didn't fully understand. The afternoon light played across her auburn hair as she turned her head, and he caught sight of another detail that made everything click into place. Behind her left ear, barely visible through her lustrous locks, was a small birthmark shaped like a crescent moon. Jackson had seen that mark before. Years ago, in a newspaper sketch accompanying an article about a wealthy merchant's missing wife. The woman had disappeared from Denver after her husband's sudden death, leaving behind questions about his demise and a substantial inheritance. Elena Ashford. He finally understood why the name Harrison had used sounded familiar. $150, shouted a gruff voice from the back of the crowd. Dangerous women are worth more. Elena's green eyes flashed with disgust, but Jackson saw something else beneath the surface: exhaustion. For all her defiance and careful control, she was reaching her limit. Her fingers trembled almost imperceptibly as she smoothed her dress, and he noticed the way her breathing had become more shallow. She was terrified and trying desperately not to show it. "Do I hear 160? Harrison called. Though his voice lacked conviction, he clearly wanted this auction over as quickly as possible. Jackson found himself stepping through the crowd before he fully realized what he was doing. The men around him parted as he moved forward, his 6-foot frame and broad shoulders commanding automatic respect. When he reached the front of the group, he could see Elena's face clearly for the first time. Her beauty was even more striking up close. High cheekbones framed those incredible emerald eyes, and her full lips were pressed together in a line that suggested both determination and fear. But it was the intelligence burning behind her gaze that stopped his breath entirely. This woman wasn't just beautiful. She was brilliant, dangerous, and completely alone. $160, called the gruff bidder again. Elena's eyes met Jackson's, and for a moment the mask of defiance slipped. He saw raw vulnerability beneath the surface, a desperate plea she would never voice aloud. She needed help, but her pride would never let her ask for it. That's when Jackson realized he couldn't let this continue. Whatever this woman had done in her past, watching her be sold like livestock to men who saw her as either a possession or a conquest, was more than he could stomach. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the crowd's murmur with quiet authority. $200. The crowd fell silent as Jackson's bid echoed across the town square. $200 was more money than most of these men saw in 6 months, and the sudden jump in price sent a ripple of shock through the assembled bidders. Elena's emerald eyes widened slightly, her beautiful face showing surprise for the first time since she had stepped onto the platform. Jackson kept his gaze locked on hers, noting how the afternoon light made her auburn hair appear almost luminous against her pale skin. Even in this degrading situation, she possessed a grace and beauty that commanded attention. But it was the flash of hope that crossed her stunning features before she quickly suppressed it that made his chest tighten with unexpected emotion. $200 going once, Harrison called, his voice betraying relief at the substantial sum. $210. The gruff bidder from the back pushed forward, his face red with anger at being outbid. I ain't backing down for no stranger. Several other men began muttering among themselves, calculating whether they could afford to continue. Jackson recognized the dangerous shift in the crowd's mood. What had started as a simple auction was becoming a contest of pride and determination. Elena's breathing quickened almost imperceptibly as she watched the bidding war develop around her. Her full lips parted slightly, and Jackson caught a glimpse of genuine fear beneath her carefully maintained composure. Despite all her defiance and threats, she was still a woman alone, surrounded by men who saw her as property to be won. $220, Jackson said calmly, never breaking eye contact with her. The gruff man spat into the dust. $230, and I got more where that came from. Jackson studied the man's weathered face and cheap clothing, knowing full well he was bluffing, but the crowd didn't know that, and their excitement was building toward something dangerous. He could feel the situation spiraling beyond a simple transaction. $250, Jackson announced, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of a man who meant sinus. The gruff bidder's face went pale as the reality of the price hit him. $250 was more than most working men earned in a year. Around them, the other potential bidders began backing away, recognizing they were outclassed. But then, Elena did something that changed everything. She stepped to the very edge of the platform, her stunning presence commanding absolute attention, and looked directly at Jackson with those incredible green eyes. "Before you spend your money," she said, her refined voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet crowd, "you should ask yourself one question." Her beautiful face was serious, almost sad. "What makes you think I won't kill you too?" The words hit Jackson like a physical blow. She wasn't just warning him about her dangerous past, she was offering him a way out, trying to save him from making what she believed would be a fatal mistake. But as he looked into those emerald eyes, framed by that heart-stopping face and lustrous auburn hair, Jackson realized something that surprised him. He trusted her completely. Jackson felt the entire crowd's attention shift to him as Elena's challenge hung in the air. Her beautiful face remained serious, those stunning emerald eyes searching his features for any sign of fear or doubt. The afternoon breeze caught strands of her auburn hair, making them dance around her shoulders like liquid fire. "Ma'am," Jackson said quietly, his voice carrying despite the growing tension, "I've lived alone on my ranch for 5 years. If you decide to kill me, at least I'll die in the company of an intelligent woman." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several men exchanged glances, unsure whether Jackson was incredibly brave or simply insane. But Elena's reaction was what stopped everyone's breath entirely. For just a moment, her carefully maintained mask slipped, and something like genuine surprise crossed her stunning features. "You're serious," she said, and it wasn't a question. $250 going once, Harrison called nervously, clearly wanting to end this auction before it spiraled further out of control. That's when the gruff bidder made his fatal mistake. "Hell with this," he snarled, pushing toward the platform. "I ain't letting some fancy stranger walk away with the prettiest woman I ever seen, not for any price." He reached for the wooden steps leading up to where Elena stood, and Jackson saw her entire body tense like a coiled spring. Her green eyes went cold as winter ice, and he caught a glimpse of the lethal intelligence that had made her so dangerous to her previous captors. "Don't," Jackson said sharply, stepping between the man and the platform. The gruff bidder spun around, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. "You got no claim on her yet, stranger. Auction ain't over." Jackson felt the familiar calm that came over him in dangerous situations. He'd spent years working cattle and dealing with wild animals, and he recognized the same unpredictable energy in this man. But before he could respond, Elena's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "If you touch that platform," she said, her refined accent making the threat sound almost elegant, "you won't live to regret it." The entire crowd turned to look at her, standing at the edge of the wooden platform, her beautiful face serene, but her emerald eyes blazing with quiet fury. She looked like some avenging angel. The simple blue dress couldn't hide the graceful lines of her figure, and her auburn hair caught the light like burnished copper. "I've killed once to protect myself," she continued, her voice never rising above a conversational tone. "Do you really think I'd hesitate to do it again?" The gruff man's hand froze on his knife handle. Around them, the crowd began backing away, suddenly remembering her earlier implications about her husband's fate. But Jackson saw something the others missed. Despite her calm demeanor and stunning beauty, Elena's hands were trembling slightly. She was reaching her breaking point, and when she snapped, people were going to die. Jackson could feel the situation balanced on a knife's edge. The gruff man's hand remained frozen on his weapon, while Elena stood like a beautiful statue of vengeance, her emerald eyes promising death to anyone who dared climb those steps. Her auburn hair moved gently in the breeze, creating an almost ethereal contrast to the lethal stillness of her posture. "This is finished," Jackson announced, his voice cutting through the tension with quiet authority. He reached into his vest and pulled out a leather pouch, counting bills with deliberate calm. "Harrison, here's your $250. "Now hold on just a minute," the gruff man snarled, his knife halfway out of its sheath. "Auction ain't over till Harrison says it's over." That's when Jackson made his decision. He turned away from the money, away from the auction, and looked directly at Elena. Her stunning face was still composed, but he could see the exhaustion and fear she was fighting to hide behind those incredible green eyes. "You don't have to do this," he called up to her, his words carrying clearly across the suddenly silent square. "You don't have to be sold to anyone." Elena's perfect features showed confusion for the first time. "What do you mean?" Jackson took a step closer to the platform, close enough to see the delicate line of her jaw, the way her full lips parted slightly in surprise. Even in this moment of crisis, her beauty was breathtaking. "I mean, you can live free," he said, and the simple words fell into the crowd like stones into still water. "You can come to my ranch, help me with the books since you're educated, and you don't owe me anything except honest work for honest pay." The gruff man spat in disgust. "That ain't how auctions work, stranger. You buy her, she belongs to you." "Nobody," Jackson said, his voice turning hard as iron, "belongs to anybody." The tension is reaching its peak. Don't miss the incredible conclusion. Make sure to like this video and subscribe for more. The crowd stirred uneasily. This wasn't how these transactions usually went. Men bought women for specific purposes, and the arrangement was understood by everyone involved, but Jackson was proposing something that challenged the very foundation of their social order. Elena stared down at him, her emerald eyes wide with disbelief. "You're offering me employment, not ownership?" "I'm offering you a choice," Jackson replied. "You can walk away from this platform right now, ride out to my ranch and work as a free woman, or you can stay here and let these men decide your fate." For a moment, the entire square fell silent, except for the sound of wind stirring the dust. Elena's beautiful face went through a series of emotions: suspicion, hope, fear, and something that might have been gratitude. But before she could answer, the gruff man finally lost all restraint. "Like hell," he roared, pulling his knife completely free and lunging toward Jackson's back. That's when Elena moved, and Jackson understood exactly why she had survived everything that had brought her to this moment. Elena leaped from the platform with the fluid grace of a wildcat, her blue dress billowing around her as she landed directly behind the attacking man. Before Jackson could turn around, she had grabbed the man's wrist and twisted it with precise, brutal efficiency. The knife clattered to the ground as the gruff bidder howled in pain. "I warned you," she said calmly, her refined voice a stark contrast to the violence of her actions. Her auburn hair had fallen partially across her face, but her emerald eyes remained cold and focused as she maintained her grip on the man's arm. Jackson spun around to see Elena holding his attacker in a position that could easily break bones if she applied more pressure. Her stunning beauty made the display of controlled violence all the more shocking to the assembled crowd. "Let him go," Jackson said quietly. Elena's green eyes met his, searching for any sign of fear or revulsion. When she found neither, Something in her perfect features softened slightly. "Please," the gruff man gasped. "I can't feel my fingers." Elena released him with a sharp push that sent him stumbling into the crowd. He clutched his wrist and glared at both of them with a mixture of pain and humiliation, but made no move to continue the fight. "Anyone else want to discuss the terms of this arrangement?" Jackson asked the crowd, his voice carrying a clear warning. The assembled men shook their heads and began dispersing, their appetite for confrontation thoroughly dampened by what they had witnessed. Even Harrison looked relieved to collect his money and disappear from the scene. Soon, only Jackson and Elena remained in the town square. She stood a few feet away from him, her beautiful face uncertain as she smoothed her dress with trembling hands. "Why?" she asked finally. "You don't know anything about me, except that I'm dangerous." Jackson studied her face. The high cheekbones, the full lips, the intelligence burning behind those incredible emerald eyes. "I know you defended yourself when someone tried to force you. I know you're educated and capable, and I know you just saved my life when you could have let me die and walked away free." Elena's breath caught slightly. "You really meant it? About the ranch? About working as a free woman?" "I meant every word." Jackson extended his hand toward her. "My name is Jackson Cole. I own 300 acres of good grazing land about an hour's ride from here. I need someone who can read and write to help manage the books, and I pay fair wages." For a long moment, Elena stared at his outstretched hand. Then, with a smile that transformed her beautiful face from stunning to absolutely radiant, she reached out and shook it firmly. "Elena Ashford," she said. "And yes, I'll take the job." As they walked toward Jackson's horse, Elena looked back once at the now empty auction platform. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing me as a person instead of property." Jackson helped her up onto his horse, noting how her touch sent electricity through his arm. "Thank you for trusting me enough to take the chance." As they rode toward the ranch and her new life of freedom, Jackson realized that saving Elena might have been the best decision he'd ever made. If you loved this incredible story of courage, freedom, and unexpected romance on the American frontier, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss our amazing historical tales. Your support helps us bring you more stories like this one. Comment below and let us know what you thought of Elena and Jackson's story.